Welcome to CS Week Women in Utilities webinar series. CS Week has launched an innovative new webinar series focusing on the expertise and keen industry perspectives of strong women leaders in utilities with timely, relevant, and complementary presentations on top-of-mind topics. I am Lisa Collins with CS Week, and I'll be your moderator for this session. Secrets of Getting Ahead in Your Career is presented by our guest speaker, Dr. Julie Albright. This program will be recorded and available for playback found under our Educational Venues tab, Women in Utilities link from our website. Attendees are encouraged to submit questions in the Q&A panel as they arise. However, all questions will be held until after the presentation for the Q&A segment. Please direct your questions to all panelists. Dr. Julie Albright is a research scientist at the University of Southern California. She has become a trusted expert commentator in the media for stories related to the social aspects of the Internet, including social networking sites like Facebook, Craigslist, and MySpace. An expert on culture and communication, her latest work focuses on the social and behavioral aspects of emerging energy technologies. Julie has been well received for the past 2 years at the CS Week Executive Summit, and many of you attended her presentation during the Women in Utilities reception at CS Week Conference 37 in Tampa, Florida. We look forward to Julie joining us again for CS Week Executive Summit and Conference 38 in San Antonio, Texas. And now it's my privilege to welcome Dr. Julie Albright.
Thank you, Lisa. I appreciate you having me. And we'll go ahead into the presentation. Well, welcome, gals. I appreciate your time today. And we're going to be talking about some of the secrets of getting ahead in your career. I wanted to give a little bit about my background first, just so you can see how this all fits together. My undergrad is in psych. And I followed up with 2 counseling degrees, a master's and then a dual doctorate, which was in counseling and sociology. In the course of these studies, I got involved in technology and digital culture and how that's all changing our society. And I've been talking about that at CS Week the last couple of years. I just had a book chapter, in fact, come out this week for Oxford University Press in the Handbook of Virtuality, talking about how relationships and such are changing with the changing technologies. Now, the reason I bring that up is because from my early days of studying the Internet to now, technological systems are becoming more and more embedded and more complex in our society. They're taking over more and more things. And what the result here is, there's sort of a rise in what you might call geek or engineering culture in organizations and in society. Now, as this kind of technological intensity grows, the vulnerability of other effects grow. And you can think about things like cybersecurity issues, and we can talk about that more as we go forward. But the idea that with this increasing sort of geek or techno culture, certain skills the technocrats are not very good at by self-selection. They're not interested in things like psychology, sociology. They've selected into working with things, working with widgets, etc., which creates new vulnerabilities in organizations. So what I want you all to think about is the idea that you are working in a critical infrastructure business. So things like the smart grid, things like the Internet of Things, automobiles becoming yet another node in the system, as we have EVs and self-driving vehicles that are increasingly connected to this network. Organizations, because of this, need to be more concerned not just with the technical side of these things, but also with the non-technical skills, which in some ways could be left behind with this intensification of technology. So that is where organizations can have a breach of different examples you can think about. So what I want to suggest today is that developing soft skills, things like reading people or making judgments, leadership skills, networking, presentation skills, these are the kinds of skills that are going to be needed more than ever in these organizations, even though they may not realize it at the time. I wanted to also make mention, my dissertation was on impression management in this digital environment. And when you think about this, impression management, in other words, making a good impression or managing the impression that you're making, is the common thread to all the things that I'm going to be talking about today, but it's also very much more applicable in the digital environment when we think about, for example, social media or even emails, all of that. So let's get started thinking about getting ahead in your career, what that means, what are some of the skills that are involved. So to start us out, let's think about what does this idea mean about getting ahead. People have different meanings when you think about that. What I want you to consider here is that there are different meanings or perspectives in terms of getting ahead between employees and employers. These have different meanings in terms of where your position is on that hierarchy and also based on the career path that you've chosen. From the employee perspective, getting ahead, it really ties into your own value system and also your own personal identity. And by the way, I'm not going to touch on this much today, but if you're in the position of managing people, these ideas are critical. What's important to them? What's important to that person under you? And it may not be the same thing that you value, and that's how you motivate them, getting into that area. So, for example here, from the employee perspective, things like opportunities to develop your abilities are things you might be looking for, or increased responsibilities, financial compensation, recognition from your peers or professional groups, flexibility and work-life balance, and I'm sure you could think of others. From the employer's perspective, getting ahead may be something very different. And usually it links to the mission of the organization. Some examples: notable or exceptional performance, personal initiative, enthusiasm for taking on new challenges, your attitude, in other words, your demonstrated ability to meet commitments. Are you someone that can be counted on? Do you do what you say you're going to do? I think of that as a kind of integrity. The idea of leadership skills and capabilities. Can you motivate others? Can you form consensus? Maybe on ideas that originally they didn't have consensus. You know, can you build teams and get people going towards a goal, etc.? And I'm sure there's others as well. Now, one thing to note is you can provide leadership every day, even if your position isn't necessarily defined that way. So think of yourself as a leader, no matter where you're at. And if you demonstrate these kinds of skills, people will recognize them. So think about this now. When you think about getting ahead, this also has different meanings in terms of whether or not, let me move this over a little bit, of where you're going to be. For example, are you going to be an individual technical contributor of some kind? Are you going to be a teacher or a mentor or a professor where you're teaching people something or educating in some way or educating customers or something? Are you going to be a technical team or project leader? Or are you going to go up into the management or executive level? Or are you going to be entrepreneurial? Every one of these positions has a different way of thinking about what it means to get ahead. And you can see from the arrows that there's more internal-facing positions, which is more the individual technical contributor side, and then moving toward more external, you know, the manager, the executive leader, that's the face of the organization. So a few things that you want to be thinking about here that are very important is to be aware of both the written and the unwritten rules of your organization. Things that are written might be things like policy. For example, you know, access to social media or using your devices or sharing information. And also, of course, the legal requirements and regulation. These are the written rules. But there are also unwritten rules that are equally important, and this is where sometimes people miss it. The idea of culture. What do people wear? How do people behave? If everyone's going out for drinks or, you know, socializing of some kind after work on a Thursday, are you going or are you skipping out? And people notice little things like that. If you're fitting in to the culture, and also the politics, who's friends with who talks to who, how do things work within your organization. Studies have been done on this, and they call this task versus relationship. What they're saying is people that are good at the task only are more likely to get fired or not move up or not promoted than those that are good at the relationships, those that understand the politics, the culture that fit in and such. So think about that. It's more important than you might think. So here's a few actions you can take in this regard. Observe and interpret the environment. What's not being said? What are the unwritten rules that you need to take notice of? What are those that are moving up? What are they doing? Take note of all that. Understand what's expected of you. Understand your boss. What motivates him or her? What makes him tick or her tick? How can you help them look good? Those are some of the things that are very important. Interact, participate. Don't be off in your office all the time, sort of segmented away from everyone else. Show initiative. Find a mentor, very important, to help you navigate these environments. Volunteer for the difficult assignments. Take on things, maybe even a little extra. That'll get you ahead. And almost always say yes. So let's take a look now at a couple specific skills that you could develop. We're talking now about communication within organizations. One of the important sectors of communication is public speaking and the fear of public speaking. I don't know if any of you have experienced this or not. Mark Twain said there are two types of speakers, those who get nervous and those who are liars. I don't know if you noticed the CES week speech that's going around viral on the internet, but there's a new curved TV coming out this week in Las Vegas, and a famous director came up on stage to talk about it, and the teleprompter failed. He had a meltdown on stage, and now it's going viral. He just walked off. So this fear of public speaking is very common. You may have this fear, in fact. A lot of people do. Some of the symptoms are anxiety, you're thinking a lot about it, ruminating, you avoid events which focus on your own speaking, physical distress, you can become sick or feelings of panic. The thing is to think about, you can overcome these things. A lot of people will avoid moving up in their career, moving into leadership positions, solely because of these kinds of issues. But what is it that we're really afraid of here?
In 1930, the Republican-controlled House of Representatives, in an effort to alleviate the effects of the Great Depression, passed the the tariff bill, the Hawley-Smoot Tariff Act, which raised or lowered? Raised.
You may remember that film, Ferris Bueller's Days Off. Some people fear falling flat like that in front of an audience. They fear being judged, things like that. But here's what I want you to think about. Don't think about public speaking as just for special occasions or a large group meeting. You may be public speaking every day in business meetings within your organization. You just don't think about it that way. And the more persuasive you can be, the better that you're going to be at persuading people to your project, your position, whatever it might be. So leadership roles always entail some kind of public speaking, both internally and externally, as the face of the company. The thing to know is this isn't a gift. It's a set of skills that can be learned, and that's the good news, I think. So you will get better with practice. Now, sometimes people, we were talking about this, in fact, just yesterday, people talk about feeling so nervous. All speakers feel nervous, just about every single one of them before a talk. One other thing to note that actually helps calm people down is that the audience, unless you're having a complete and total nervous breakdown, some nervousness is perceived by the audience as energy. So without some level of nervousness going in, your presentation might actually fall flat. So a little bit of nerves can actually be a good thing when translated to an audience. So as I said before, the only cure for this is experience. I don't know if you've been to Toastmasters, but I think this is a fabulous organization. That'll give you that kind of experience. It's a low-cost group. They have them at mornings, afternoons, evenings, all across cities across America, certainly. And it gives you the opportunity to speak in a safe and supportive environment, but it also breaks down the skills into manageable small pieces. For example, vocal variety or gesturing, or how to tell a story for more advanced speakers, for example. And this is the kind of thing, I put a little tinyurl.com Toastmasters USC. If you'd like to see how Toastmasters works, there's a little video of that. But I would definitely recommend going to Toastmasters if you really have that fear. It'll make all the difference for you. And you can, again, you can practice from elementary, basic 101 skills to very sophisticated storytelling, joke-telling skills, etc. That'll take you to the next level. Highly recommend that program. So another thing to think about. Now think about these as various skills, again, that you can learn, that you can practice, and that you can develop. I wanted to give a few words about networking, because this, again, is also very important. Jobs, opportunities, projects, collaborations. For me, they've all begun with networking. So I wanted to give you just a few tips, a few ideas to think about here regarding networking. To me, always be ready. Have cards with you at all times. I mean, going to the market, going to a dinner party, going to church, wherever you happen to be. Don't think about networking as only occurring in official business events like a conference or something. You can meet people anytime, any day, anywhere through anyone. So to me, it kind of goes back to this idea of luck. Luck is preparation meets opportunity. Be prepared. Keep an open mind. And that's where you're going to start getting into these opportunities for moving up in your career. The next idea about networking here is, to me, think win-win situations. How can you create a win-win? A win for you, a win for that other person. Think to yourself, how can I help this person that I've just met? Is there someone I can introduce them to? Is there something I can do, some advice I could give them, some book I can recommend, or maybe it's a YouTube video that you recently saw, or a new Twitter account they might want to follow. Give to this person without the expectation of giving back. That's very important. The second thing you want to do is compliment with a smile. People yearn for validation. They want to feel important. They want to be recognized for their efforts and achievements, no matter what level they're at in an organization. I saw a CEO recently, software CEO, and I thought what he was doing was great. It's a new startup, and I told him he's exactly where he needs to be in the market, exactly positioned. This is where things are going. I actually saw him breathe a sigh of relief, and you know, I meant it. So the other thing about giving a compliment when you meet someone is be sincere in your compliment. Be thoughtful. Notice what people are doing and what has meaning for them, and give credit to them for it. It goes a long way. Next thing you know, the CEO has asked me to come consult with our firm. Networking. I didn't do that for networking purposes per se, but I wanted to get to know this person. Add people to your circle that way. Add them on LinkedIn after you've met them. The next set of skills I wanted to just touch on, and again, we can't go into any great depth on these, but I want you to start thinking about how these things interact in your everyday goings about life. The next important skill is reading people. The idea that you're going to be looking at the nonverbal communication of others. Now, sometimes people laugh about this, but this is true. The fact is that women are better at reading the nonverbals than men are. You may not be shocked by this news, but you're already at an advantage. Use it. Develop it. And what I want to encourage you to do is begin to listen with your eyes, even more than you do now, because studies have found that up to 93% of all communication is nonverbal, is things like body language, for example. You're going to be amazed if you start really looking. You'll hear somebody say, hey, great to see you, or nice to see you, and their eyes are not smiling, or their arms are crossed, or they have a scowl on their face. And you're going to say to yourself, wow, the words were A, but the body language or the nonverbals are B, and B is telling the truth. So things to look for. What do you want to look for? Are people, for example, you're in a meeting and you're pitching an idea or you're presenting something. Are people open? Are they smiling? Are they leaning toward you, leaning in? These are all sort of positive signs. Or are they frowning? Are they leaning back and crossing their arms away from you? Are they rolling their lips inward? That's the sign of death. That's a terrible sign. It's almost like a nonverbal disgust move when you put your lips inward like that. Do they look lost if you're speaking? If people look lost, a lot of times, for example, men, it's like they don't want to ask for directions. I'm sure some of you have seen that. They won't often in a crowd raise their hand and say, hey, wait, I'm lost. So use the nonverbals to see if your audience, for example, be it a small meeting or a large group, is with you. If they're not with you, slow down, go back and reiterate so everyone's on the same page. See how your message is being received as you're delivering it. Watch the body language. In meetings, you will learn so much more, and this will really be a big skill for you. So let's look a little bit more at prepared communications. Let's look at some of the skills of this public speaking we're talking about. How do you get yourself ready, be it in a smaller meeting or in a large arena? So what do you want to do? Let's start at the beginning here. What's your goal for this communication? What's a great speech or presentation supposed to do? So you have to think to yourself, what are you doing? Are you trying to inspire this group? Are you trying to educate? Do you want to create change or motivate? Are you trying to close a deal? Or do you want to get more speeches and presentations and promotions? What is your main goal? So those are some of the things that you want to think about. Before you give your talk, say to yourself, what is the problem that the audience has for which your insights, your expertise or story is the answer? What are you bringing to the table that is unique? What is the main goal? Are you trying to persuade someone? Are you trying to sell? Are you trying to educate? Really get that crisp in mind as you start out. So a great speech, a great talk, a great presentation begins with preparation. But how do you prepare? What do you do? So start with your audience and work backwards to your speech. Don't push it out to them. Start with, who are these people? What is their level of expertise with the topic? Is this a sophisticated audience? I always ask myself that. Is this a sophisticated audience of engineers I'm talking to about a technical issue? Then you can take it to the next level. Is this more of a lay audience that might not be familiar with the terms that you're using or some of the details? Then you want to bring them up to speed on that. Like I said before, don't leave anybody behind if you can help it. So you have to assess their level of sophistication with your topic and how much education you need to do during your talk to get everybody on board and going with you. Think about your talk as a journey. You want everyone on board and going, sailing off on the boat together. Don't leave anybody behind on the dock because they don't understand something. Think about how much time you have then. Try not to cover too many points and leave time for Q&A at the end. Be enthusiastic. Nothing helps a speech or a talk or a pitch go over better than enthusiasm. Passion goes a long way in making a successful speech. But the thing is, sometimes you're not excited about a talk. I have to do a course I've done at USC on Intro to Sociology. We have to talk about all different aspects of sociology. For example, demography, like what they do at the U.S. Census Bureau. Well, I'm not a demographer because I'm not interested in demography, but I have to talk about it, and I have to talk about it with some kind of enthusiasm. Otherwise, the students will be bored and walk out of the room. So what I suggest you do is find something interesting to you in the topic. Maybe you just cut a slice of it and look at a case study or something. Find something that's interesting. If you're not interested in the topic, why should your audience be? And to me, it's an issue of respect. It's respecting someone's time so that you're presenting something that you feel good about, you're interested in, and you're all there for a reason. You're not wasting someone's time. So as you go into your talk, step one, you want to build rapport with your audience. You want to have a warm feeling with that audience. So sometimes people try to build rapport by telling a joke. Be careful. One, telling a joke is a pretty sophisticated speaking skill, let's say. Some people aren't very good at delivering a joke. It's hard to do. So if you don't feel real comfortable with doing it, don't write that off. I also want you to think about the type of joke. You probably won't do this, but I just wanted to make mention. I went to a meeting. I'm in a leadership position in a boating, yachting organization, and this was an international meeting. And at the board, one man got up and told a joke which was offensive to women. Next guy gets up and tells a joke which was very homophobic. You know, and I sat there and I thought, geez, you know, they don't realize they're alienating people here with what they think is a funny story, but it really isn't funny or a funny joke. So make sure it's funny. Make sure it's not alienating people. Again, you want people to come on board and go on this journey with you, not be left behind or turned off to you because you've offended them now. So be very careful in your choice of that. Also, audiovisuals. Now, you want to choose your presentation software. Sometimes people don't use presentation software. Sometimes they do. What do you want to use? Do you want to use PowerPoint? Do you want to use Prezi or Presenter? Key thing is make sure that you're comfortable with the technology so it's not a distraction. The guy I mentioned earlier at CES that had that meltdown on stage because his teleprompter didn't work, I gave a keynote address at SAP this last fall and had the teleprompters, and all of a sudden I see a message pop up that I wasn't expecting. It said, Julie, your pearls are banging on the microphone. And it shocked me because I didn't realize that they could put a message right into the slides. And it was like the voice of God suddenly. So I said, I must have looked shocked for a minute. So rather than just try to pretend that didn't happen, I just said to the audience, hey, the voice of God just came up on the screen. They all laughed. We were all together on the same page, and we went on. But sometimes that's the way to handle it. Bring your audience along for the journey. What's going on? Hey, the voice of God just spoke to me, and I was shocked for a minute. You know, and you can kind of create a funny moment of bonding together, as opposed to what this other fellow did, which he had a meltdown. He just walked off the stage. So there's some new, think about visuals, too. There's some new wonderful visuals in PowerPoint that are coming out. You can see here, as well as Prezi, which we're using today. And then in Mac, of course, we've got Presenter. It looks very nice. So these are lovely ways to present. A picture speaks 1,000 words. Avoid death by PowerPoint. The idea there's too many words on the slides. I've seen a lot of engineers do that. People can't absorb that much, and they also can't read that much while you're speaking. So you kind of have to think about that. You know, it's better to have bullets and go into detail than to have every single word on the slide. Second of all, it's better to break into several slides or use an image than have, you know, chapters of words on one slide. This is a personal bugaboo of mine. This just happened at a conference I went to. Remember again about the journey, getting everyone on the boat and going off together to a direction. Don't leave anybody behind. That's sort of the bottom line. A guy got up and said, well, the ALM or the ADP by the SLN, I had no idea what he was talking. Some people were nodding. Some people were looking confused. Be sure not to do this. If you have any question about it, say what the acronym means, the Advanced Language Mechanics Group, or ALM, and then later you can say ALM, but define it so everyone's on board with you in the beginning. I see a lot of people do this, and if you're lost, what happens is people start ruminating on it. Well, what is that? What was ADP again? And they're thinking that, and they're not paying attention to your presentation, so you've lost people. Use proper English and avoid slang. That's an important thing that happens, especially with younger presenters, and also with female presenters. Just as a key, there's a kind of speaking where females at the end of a sentence go up, and it's a way that they speak, and especially younger girls do it. That kind of talk is very prevalent amongst young females. It's becoming more prevalent, turns out, amongst younger males. Be careful. When you rise at the end of a sentence like that, it denotes a question. It's the nonverbal message is it's a question. So what it does is if you're making a statement that sounds like a question, you're instilling in your audience a lack of trust or credibility in yourself as the expert. So try to avoid that. If you do it in your personal conversations, that's one thing, but certainly in a more formal presentation, you want to try to avoid that going up at the end of the sentence. Again, just the subtle nonverbal. So the day before your presentation, one thing is do not pull an all-nighter. Most important is to get a good night's sleep so your brain can think, you're fast on your feet, especially if you get hit by a question or a circumstance like the failing technology where you have to sort of wing it. You have to be sharp, and a good night's sleep is going to help you do that. Sleep renews the brain. That's why it's so important. Practice and practice so you don't read your presentation. If it's very stilted in your reading, you're, again, losing the audience's attention. And with all these smart devices, people will start, texting and Facebooking and emailing and looking at the news rather than paying attention to your presentation. Be familiar enough so you can elaborate off the slides naturally as opposed to just reading through a presentation. Make a bold point or a general idea and then support with details, with charts and things like that, and then go on to the next. An old school way of thinking is tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you told them. And the thing is, just do your presentation. You can kind of get a general sense of it, but there's no need to tell them what you're going to tell them and tell them what you told them. Sum up, but this is sort of an old school and in some ways outmoded way of presenting. Make sure if you're using any links that they work. If you gave a technology, a talk using a technology like a cloud-based resource or even PowerPoint slides and you're going to click on a link, make sure that that link works. Otherwise, another key is to download any kind of media or visual to your laptop, like a film or something. Just make sure that you're not reliant on outside technology. Also, if you are reliant on an internet and you're elsewhere, I carry my own Wi-Fi hotspot. I don't rely on a hotel or a business's Wi-Fi to connect to the internet. Now, your host may want a bio. They might want to introduce you at a meeting or at a conference prior, so ask them, and you may want to email one over prior. And think about how you will introduce yourself if the host doesn't. They might just say, oh, this is Mary Smith. And you might want to elaborate certain parts of your experience that might be relevant to that talk. Lastly here, download a second set of slides or have a plan B in case there's some problem with the slides you sent the host or something like that. Get there early, test the tech, get mic'd up, anything like that. Sound check. Don't wait until the last minute. At least maybe a half hour before and things like that. At least a half hour, if not before. I like to get there even earlier to get the logistics. Get familiar with the room. If there's a mic, what kind of mic you'll use. Find out who will go before you, who speaks after you, and where you fall in the flow of the day or the meeting. You know, build a rapport. Introduce yourself to the host, to other speakers, other people in the meeting, and things like that. Step away from the podium if you can. Try to, you know, chat with some people and build rapport as they come into the room. That makes a lot easier talk when you see a friendly face when you're giving your talk because you've already introduced yourself. Speak loudly if there's no microphone. Again, this is a lot of females I've seen, you know, speak very quietly. What you want to do is speak to the back of the room if you have no microphone, and be thinking of that. Try to control your own nonverbal communication. Any kind of like nervous things like that, you want to smile, you want to communicate that you're at ease. Avoid tipping your head to one side. That's called a head cant. You'll see that sometimes on television with talking heads, they'll do that, and that voice rising at the end of the sentence. The head cant, the reason you want to avoid that, typically men don't do that, women do. It's a submissive posture, and you don't want to communicate, you know, a submissive, I'm not quite an expert, I'm not quite sure of myself when you're trying to give a presentation or a business talk or something of that nature. So try to kind of sort of control that in those settings. Things like don't jangle your keys or don't keep your hands in a pocket or lean on the podium. Try not to be monotone and vary your vocal tone. Move around and gesture. Don't be just static so the audience falls asleep. And try not to say, you know, things like that too much. Try to be natural in your speech. Think of a speech as a conversation that you're having with a group of people. If there's a Q&A, answer questions without going on too long. Also ask the audience if they heard the question. If not, repeat it for them so everyone hears it. If you don't know an answer, don't lie to your audience. Say, I don't know. That's a very interesting question. We can look into that, or we can find out or research it further. Don't think you have to know everything. And in fact, sometimes not knowing is endearing to the audience. And it shows that you're an ethical person and a person that is someone of your word. You're not lying. And people that are good at picking up nonverbals are going to know you're lying. So that's always a bad tact. Keep your eye on time. Try not to go into someone else's time. Which reminds me, if your timing is off, you've misjudged it, or sometimes people will ask a question and it'll throw your timing. Don't start talking faster. What you want to do is edit down your talk on the fly. Cut ahead to slides. Oh, we'll just skip those if you'd like to ask about them in Q&A. Do that as opposed to talking faster and trying to jam in all your content. The audience doesn't know what you were going to say, so they won't really know. After you've given this successful talk, have cards ready. Remember that networking. People are going to want to meet you, talk to you. Bring a pen and collect their cards. As soon as you can, write on the back of that card who the person was, where you met them, any kind of identifying details that you can remember. Oh, we both went to the same college or something to jog your memory later. Sometimes you think you're going to remember everyone, but when you meet hundreds of people, sometimes you forget. Follow up with a thank you note to your host and anyone else afterwards. And consider a public thank you of some kind, maybe on Twitter, or follow people on LinkedIn. That's always also a good way to keep a business relationship going. So thank you. My time's about up for this segment. Follow me if you'd like to on Twitter. I'm at Dr. Julie A. My email is albright@usc.edu, and I'd be happy to take your questions. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Julie. This has certainly been an excellent presentation, and you've raised many thought-provoking elements that may be invisible barriers to, successful upward career movement. You've had a number of questions come in, so I guess we'll go ahead and start with those. Let's see, the first one says that you mentioned the role of social media in networking. How might those be used to help with networking?
If you meet people at conferences, for example, LinkedIn is a great way, better than, let's say, Facebook per se, which may be used more for personal communication and networking. LinkedIn is a great business network at this point in time. So you may want to add people to your LinkedIn request to add them right away. Also on Twitter, if you're active there, you can add people or follow them on Twitter, and sometimes they'll follow you back, for example. So those kinds of social media networking opportunities are great.
Okay, so that kind of follows up to another question about which social media platform you would have a preference for, would suggest. So LinkedIn would probably be the one that you would suggest most?
Yeah, I think LinkedIn is great for business. If you use Facebook exclusively, I know some people do, think about it again about that impression management. If you use your Facebook for, personal, family, things like that, if you know a colleague well, you may want to add them there. Increasingly, younger workers are using Facebook and all. There's no seams between work and private life. But if you want to have sort of a private zone for, the baby pictures, the family events and things like that, you might want to keep that on a Facebook and more business communication in places like maybe Twitter or LinkedIn. So there's a separation between those personal events and your business life.
Would you recognize any other pitfalls that, in terms of social media and career, that you would advise, to be on the lookout for, or?
I would actually. Increasingly, companies are going to lengths to actually hire people even to investigate your social presence. So they could even go on places like Craigslist or places that you wouldn't even think of to see how you're presenting yourself. You're talking about impression management again here now on these networks, and people have lost not only job opportunities, but I've had students even say that they've lost internship opportunities because of, for example, party pictures they posted on Facebook drinking or something like that. So you want to be careful of what can be seen by employers. Also, there's a new thing called Facebook graph search, whereby people can search out all kinds of things about you. So be careful on there of things like liking certain groups or things that might be super controversial, or because now people can search those things out. You'd be surprised what they can find.
So would you suggest being Facebook friends with your boss?
Again, I think it just depends on the organization and the culture. That's what you want to think about. Is this a culture where we're Facebook friends, or people are Facebook friends with coworkers, or is this a culture where that's kind of frowned on? And I think it's just a case-by-case basis and how long you've known people. Sometimes people are great friends with people that they are in the working environment with. I would just caution you to think about the idea that if you do that, you're now exposing, your personal life to potential scrutiny as you're moving up the ladder in the working world.
Yeah, very good caution there. Stepping back just a little bit, you mentioned a number of presentation development tools or suggestions. Do you have resources for presentation development that you could share with the group?
In terms of the presentation itself, sure, yeah, we can share those, and I'd be happy to send a link as well to this presentation if you don't have it on your capture, so that people can go through it. But I would definitely strongly recommend, again, that Toastmasters, and they have a website. If you haven't done that, it's so inexpensive, and what you get out of it is invaluable. I mean, it took me from being, basically sick, physically ill every day before I went to class to winning every teaching award you can win and keynoting huge conferences now and things like that. So I will all give the credit back to Toastmasters. So I would definitely look into that as well.
Okay. Well, you've had another question. What's the difference between a mentor and a sponsor?
Well, the idea of a mentor is someone that will give you the ins and outs, will guide you. It's usually someone that's a step or two above where you are. It's someone with more experience. When I went into graduate school, a doctor friend of my brother's, the most important piece of advice I got was find a mentor. And that's really true whether you're going into, say, a graduate school program or you're going into a company. The unwritten rules of a company, the politics, how to move up, all people that have been in an organization know these things. You also need someone to advocate for you. Sometimes there's going to be tough situations or challenges, or maybe there's new projects coming up, and that mentor could say to you, hey, or could say to other people in the organization, hey, why don't we consider Jackie for this project, even though, people might say, well, she hasn't led something like this before. Well, yeah, but I think she's ready. So they can sort of advocate for you to be moved up in an organization. So I think that's very important. Not just, and the other thing is a mentor may not be in your same organization, but maybe someone that can help and advise you in the movement of your career. Very important to have someone to bounce things off of. Maybe you want to ask that person before you play it out in the workplace, things like that.
Okay, there's another question. It says, women don't seem to go very high up in the utility industry. What other industry could we use our skills? This person is a customer service director, but would eventually want to get away from customer service because they find it very stressful.
Yeah, it is stressful. That's very true. Well, I would say in this whole area, you've got a lot of great skills. I mentioned before this whole, increase of technology and widening spread of the net and such. You have a lot of skills that can play out in different kinds of organizations. For example, we see a huge surge in the electric vehicle field, autonomous vehicles, this whole transportation plus energy plus information technology is just in its infancy. And that's going to be an exciting area to be involved in. And there are a lot of areas around energy, around software and technologies that are being developed, around energy efficiency, around green and things that are just getting started. To me, the whole sort of green area is taking off. It's a trend that's going to intensify in the coming years. And you all have some great information and great skills and knowledge for surrounding areas, maybe even in private sector, that are not necessarily within the utility itself.
I have another question. You're being asked perhaps some of your favorite authors on subjects for women and career development and leadership development. Right.
Well, I've always liked things like Tony Robbins, but I read a wide spectrum of things. I think it's important, and I think this is really something that a lot of people don't do, is read a breadth of things. Expose yourself to a breadth of experience. Step outside the typical. That's where you're going to get new ideas, exposures to new ways of thinking. It's going to give you new ways of approaching things. Read everything from popular magazines to, business newspapers. That really gets a finger on the pulse, not only of your field, but also what the larger public is thinking and doing, what the trends are, and also, of course, on things like social media. So I think that's really the most important thing. People get stuck in a rut or stuck in a very narrow view, and if you can widen out that view, that's where you're going to bring new innovative thinking to your organization or to your own life and career.
Yeah, you've definitely raised a number of different elements for everyone to think about that could definitely be improved upon and be helpful to them. But we're getting closer to the top of the hour, so I wanted to be respectful of your time and of the attendees. So I guess we'll get ready to conclude here. So CS Week in Conference 38 will be held from May 5th to the 9th at the Henry B. Gonzalez Convention Center. And early registration is now open, and we invite you to come to the Women in Utilities Networking Reception on May 6th, 2014. And Dr. Albright, this has just been a fantastic presentation, and we appreciate you coming and giving this for us. And at this time, I'd like to thank the attendees for joining us today, too. And this will conclude our webinar.
Thank you all. Thank you for having me, and I look forward to seeing you all and interacting again soon.
Thank you.
Take care now. Bye-bye.